In this video, I'm going to tell you how therapy can be less uncomfortable and more effective. Hey everybody, my name is Leah Benson, and I am a body-based psychotherapist, life coach, and psychedelic guide in Tampa Bay. And in this video, I'm going to break down mental health into its simplest parts so you see why most therapies are overcomplicated and make your mental health journey longer than it should be. And then I'll tell you what to look for if you want your therapy to move faster and be more effective in the long run. To begin this story, I have to start with your brain, what it does, how it works, and what exactly your mental health has to do with it. So here we go. Like all your organs, your brain has a specific role in your body. And thanks to Dr. Lisa Feldman Barrett, who wrote an amazing book called How Emotions Are Made, you can think of that role as one of a conductor, kind of like the conductor of a symphony. And in this case, that symphony is your body's overall energy budget. And as your brain runs this energy budgeting process, it coordinates and controls the levels and movements of things like glucose, oxygen, salt, water, and many other things. But we're keeping it simple for now. The basics of this body budgeting process go like this. The brain takes in information from your body and the environment 24/7, does some magical stuff with it, and produces an ongoing and ever-changing basic summary of how you feel, which is called core affect, or what we colloquially call mood. For instance, right now, if you pay attention to the way your body feels in a very basic way, like how much energy you have and how pleasant or unpleasant you feel, that is your core affective state, or your mood. And you can always be aware of that basic summary of feeling because it always exists. You are never without it. It might feel neutral, or it might feel intense, and I'll tell you why that's relevant in a minute, but for now, I just want you to keep in mind that your brain is always generating this basic summary of how you feel, called core affect, or mood. And why does your brain create this general summary of how you feel? Basically, because it's getting you involved in the job of managing your body's energy budget, because that helps with efficiency. And efficiency is important because a species that conducts its energy budgeting efficiently is usually one that lasts the test of time, which is pretty much what life is all about. And so, according to the scientists, the most efficient way for a brain to manage a body's energy budget is for the brain to predict the energy that the body's gonna need before it needs it. And ours does that too. Which, if you think about it, is kind of mind-boggling, because there's so many possibilities of what might happen in the next moment that the brain has to prepare you for. There's like billions of them. And your brain is doing that every single moment of every single day, using past experience as a guide. And beyond that, the way all that works gets very nerdy and scientific and complicated, so we're going to avoid that for the moment. Now, in case you're thinking, okay, that's nice, what does this have to do with my mental health? Well, here's your answer. Turns out that your mind, and therefore your mental health, is a reflection of how well that energy management process is going in your body. Because if your body's energy budget, or your brain's energy budgeting process, is out of whack, it's going to be reflected by what you experience as a preponderance of unpleasant moods, sensations, emotions, and thoughts. And you're going to either be too energized or not energized enough to optimally manage the situations you are in every day. And that's it in a nutshell. So to make it practical, here's why knowing this makes managing your mental health simpler. It sets the stage for a clear understanding of the ways that you can help your brain better manage your body's energy budget, which translates into very concrete ways you can improve your mental health. Before we go there, though, I have to share a little surprise with you. Turns out that not only does your brain produce core affect or mood as guideposts to help you manage your body's energy budget, it also produces thoughts, memories, perceptions, attention, and various other cognitions, including emotions, so you can better manage your body's energy budget. That's right. Cognitions and emotions actually exist for the purpose of helping you manage your body's energy budget, which might sound kind of weird and unbelievable, because it's a complete contrast to the traditional way of thinking about cognitions and emotions. In fact, it's a radical departure. And on top of that, it turns out that emotions have erroneously been thought of as something different from thoughts for millennia. But as we now know, based on the latest brain science, they're not. They're simply a part of the information that your brain generates that helps you make sense of the state of your body's energy budget and manage the state of your brain's ongoing energy budgeting process. Just so you know, because I don't want you to think I'm just making this stuff up, this radical new way of understanding emotions is actually derived from the best guess that science has right now about how the brain works, which doesn't mean it's particularly negotiable. It just means that responsible scientists always call their theories a guess. In fact, this guess about brain function and emotions is actually such a good guess that it's sort of like the theory of gravity. Nobody would call gravity a theory, but that's how science works. Nothing in science is ever a fact. It's simply the best guess based on the preponderance of evidence from the latest data. In other words, gravity is a theory. And that's the case right now with brain function and what emotions are and how they're made. The evidence just supports what I've told you better than it supports anything out there about brain function and what emotions are. The evidence just supports what I've told you better than it supports anything else out there about brain function and what emotions are. Even though you wouldn't know it by looking at popular culture or by looking at the work of researchers who keep running studies based on outdated perspectives of brain function and emotion. And I know that what I've just said is potentially scrambling your brain right now, so I'll say it one more time. Cognitions and emotions are nothing more than signals that your brain generates so that you can better manage the state of your body's energy budget in a particular moment or as a part of the trajectory of your ongoing energy budgeting process. Don't worry, this is all going to make sense soon, and it's going to make improving your mental health much, much easier. How about I give you a concrete example of what I mean by a body budget imbalance and explain the difference between a momentary body budget imbalance and an ongoing problem with your brain's energy budgeting process, so you can make sense of it as it relates to real life. A momentary imbalance in the state of your body's energy budget could happen, for instance, when you've heard someone say something you didn't predict they would say. In that case, the first thing that happens is that your brain has to correct its miscalculation, also known as a prediction error. and it has to redistribute some of the body's energy so you can register the difference between what you expected to hear and what was actually said. That's called encoding prediction error, and it often has a physical feeling associated with it, depending on how big the difference was between what you expected to hear and what you actually heard. Then, depending on context, you might call it humor and experience the physical feeling of the energy shift that has occurred as pleasant. Or you might call it an insult and experience the energy shift as unpleasant. And that's a process that goes on every moment of every day, usually outside of your conscious awareness, unless, as I mentioned, there's a very big difference between how much energy your brain predicted you would need and how much you actually needed at the moment to encode the prediction error, because the bigger the difference, the more intense the moment feels. And it's the intense moments that you're more likely to notice. That is what makes up most of day-to-day life. Prediction error, encoding prediction error, repeat. And the better your brain predicts what's going to happen in the next moment, the more efficiently you are using the energy resources you have available in your body. And the more pleasant you feel, more of the time. What's the difference between that and problems with the ongoing energy budgeting process? Well, the symptoms of a constant malfunction in your brain's ongoing energy budgeting process are usually much more serious and much longer lasting. And they can be much more mysterious to diagnose and generally take a lot longer to get back on track. Thanks to Dr. Chris Palmer, author of the amazing book called Brain Energy, you can think of the problem of an overall malfunction of your body's energy budgeting process as a disrupted flow of traffic through a city, with cars being your cells. So if the system is malfunctioning, maybe the cells don't have enough gas, maybe they're missing turn signals or navigation lights, maybe the driver is impaired, which in this case is your mitochondria. Maybe they have bad brakes or a bad idle setting. Maybe they're overheating. Maybe they don't have enough lubrication or the wheels are out of alignment. You name it. Bottom line is, if you've got fundamental problems with the flow of traffic in your city caused by cellular dysfunction, which incidentally is caused by and causes mitochondrial dysfunction at the heart of it all, you are going to have ongoing problems physically and mentally. And that circles us back to the point, which is that ongoing malfunctions in your body's energy budgeting process will cause your brain to deliver too little or too much energy around the system at the wrong time and place. And that means you will have an incredibly high chance of having symptoms that are called, on the extreme end, things like treatment-resistant depression, OCD, bipolar disorder, PTSD, substance use disorder, or schizophrenia. And on the less extreme end, things like rumination, anger problems, anxiety, or dysthymia. And what I hope is becoming abundantly clear by now is that this whole mental health thing is not as overcomplicated as it's been made out to be over the years by all the convoluted concepts of therapy, religion, philosophy, and frankly, neuroscience. And instead, it's a reflection of your brain's ongoing energy budgeting process, or as I like to say, a reflection of simple energy function, which of course, on one hand is not simple at all because of how complex the body's systems are, but on the other is incredibly simple since often, if we give the body what it needs, it will get the system back in working order without us having to do much except stop spending energy on things that aren't helping it get back in balance. Okay, now that I've given you 3 seconds to digest this new and completely counterintuitive understanding of how your mental health works, let's keep going. Because I want to help you understand how easy it can be to manage your mental health from this simple energy perspective. It starts with understanding that there are 5 categories representing what I like to call the 5 pillars or 5 levers of mental health. And they are as follows: food, sleep, movement, community, and concepts. And we'll get deep into the particulars of what falls into each category in a minute. But first, I want you to think of these pillars or levers as encompassing all the inputs, actions, or thoughts that will either put you in a positive place mentally or a negative one, or that can get you back on track if you're constantly feeling terrible mentally, depending on which ones you're doing and when. So once again, the categories are food, sleep, movement, community, and concepts. Now, let me tell you about each category one by one and break down what they are. So number 1, food. By food, I mean anything that you put in or on your body. Any ingestible or absorbable nutritional input. Things like food, vitamins, supplements, water, lotions, oxygen, even sunshine. Or any pathogenic inputs like mold, allergens, noxious chemicals, poisons, etc. Number 2, sleep. And by sleep, I mean any activity that puts your body into a more restorative state, such as sleeping, meditating, getting grounded, doing anything that is a non-sleep, deeply restorative practice, and getting your circadian rhythm in alignment with the cycle of the earth. Or things like staying up all night, exposing yourself to blue light after sunset, or living in a chronically high-energy nervous system state. Number 3, movement. By movement, I mean any movement you make or any experience you have that makes you move on a large or small scale, all the way from the large movements of exercise and breathing to the small vibrations of music or song, to the cellular movements of detoxification and the electromagnetics of the whole system. Or the fact that you're not moving, or that you're moving repetitively without making compensating movements that keep you flexible. Or 4, community. By community, I mean the group and individual relationships you have. People can give us energy and help us with our body's energy budgeting, or they can require energy from us and sap our energy. In fact, without knowing it, every engagement we have with other people is either a deposit into our body's energy budget or a withdrawal. And understanding this fact and how it plays out in your life can become a superpower. Last, number 5, concepts. By concepts, I mean the mental things. I mean cognitive representations. I mean the words and ideas representing the categories we use to make sense of the world around us and to make sense of ourselves, internally and in the world. And this pillar is interesting because most everybody goes around thinking this is the most important aspect of mental health. And it is important. I mean, it's a lot of what I help people with as a therapist. But it's actually not really important in the way most people think it is. You see, concepts are what I like to call slippery, because the variation of concepts that work best to help our brains regulate our body's energy budgets most efficiently in whatever environment we happen to be in at any given moment is vast and malleable. And the value of any particular concept is completely context dependent. In other words, concepts are complicated because their truth is imprecise. The concepts we use to navigate one environment don't always work for a new environment we find ourselves in. The ones we apply to ourselves don't necessarily work for someone else. Lots of the ones that worked in our childhoods do not work when we're adults. The ones we use at home don't work at school. The ones we use in the locker room don't work at church. And the ones we use to motivate ourselves don't work for relaxing. Take money, for instance. It's a concept that's very worthwhile in society and totally worthless on a deserted island. Take being a dad. If you contributed to the genes of a child but don't know it, are you a dad? Are you a father? Are you a sperm donor? What's the difference? Who decides? Remember, concepts are ideas. They're mental representations of objects, events, or actions grouped together as equivalent in a particular time and place to achieve a particular goal. And if a concept serves to regulate your body's energy budget, then it's valuable to you and you'll use it. And if not, you won't. So here you are, going through life with your library of concepts, which you could think of as your mindset, to make it simple. And that mindset library is built from all your past experiences and all the different cultures you've been exposed to. Family culture, religious culture, school culture, work culture, governmental culture, and all the concepts you know, along with all the new ones you'll learn in the future, and all the ones you make up on the fly without even knowing it, are, plain and simple, a reflection of one of the mechanisms that the human brain has developed through evolution in order to manage the energy budget of its big, complex, mobile body. And emotions fall into this category. Because yes, as I alluded to before, emotions are concepts. And like thoughts and other cognitions, that means they are mental representations. And in this case, they are mental representations of a particular body state in a particular context or environment. As such, emotion concepts allow us to communicate a vast amount of information in one word, meaning that with one word we can communicate a ton of information about ourselves to ourselves, such as making sense of what's happening in our bodies, preparing our bodies energetically for the next moment, and prescribing what action to take next. And because we are social creatures, we can use one word to communicate a ton of information to other people about ourselves or about what we think is going on with them, so we can alter their body's energy budgets as well, for their benefit or ours. And that is absolutely magical and incredibly energetically efficient, which is why we do it. But, warning, as I mentioned, this understanding of emotions is completely different from the prevailing way emotions have been thought of for a couple thousand years. And it is only very slowly being phased into popular thinking as people catch up with the updated science. I'm sure you know that dramatic shifts in science can take a long time to catch on. I mean, it took 300 years for Galileo's theory that the Earth revolved around the sun to be accepted. But now that you know, you get to benefit right now, because this way of understanding emotions is incredibly empowering and makes your mental health journey simpler than you ever imagined. In no small part because it eliminates all the negative things that you were led to believe about yourself based on what you've been taught about what emotions are and how they work. And it allows you to use emotions and other concepts proactively to get what you want out of life. Which brings us, finally, to therapy. Now that you know what concepts are as related to mental health, and you know that their value comes from helping your brain manage your body's energy budget, what you also have to know is that there's a downside, if you will. And that downside is that since there's nothing fundamentally real or truthful about concepts, except as they are useful for us for energy management in a particular time and place, we can often be convinced that a set of concepts is the right set of concepts to navigate life with, which might be true, but which could also be decidedly not true. That is relevant to therapy because, for the most part, therapy modalities are built on a bunch of complicated, convoluted, and sometimes outdated theories and concepts of what mental dysfunction is and how to fix it. And while some of those theories are interesting, and some are capable of helping you manage or overcome your mental health struggles because the concepts help you understand your experience and yourself in a way that doesn't make you feel like some kind of failed human, quite frankly, lots of them still do leave you feeling that way because they don't look at your thoughts and behavior from the most basic and most objective perspective, which is the metabolic perspective of mental health that I am sharing with you right now. In fact, an interesting phenomenon that's happening out there right now is that there are lots of therapist training programs and therapists out there saying they're science-based, but then saying science-y things about why their therapy works that are akin to saying that the sun revolves around the earth. They're just plain outdated. For instance, there is no such thing as an emotional part of your brain, or a rational part, or a trigger. And you're not going to fix your problems by thinking about your default mode network, or the executive functioning part of your brain. And trauma-informed therapy technically means nothing except that the therapist has probably been taught that the body has to be involved in mitigating your symptoms of distress. But they probably can't tell you why, except to tell you stories about how your brain works that simply aren't true. And that's pretty funny, but also makes the point. The science they're telling you that their therapy is based on is not what makes the therapy work. What makes it work is that the stories you learn to tell yourself, in other words, the concepts you use to understand what's going on in your body, help mitigate the unpleasantness of the symptoms you experience. Because they can help you recategorize them as something less problematic. Conceptual recategorization is a powerful tool. For instance, by understanding what thunder really is, you can experience the surprise feeling you get when you hear it. Like it's a pleasant thrill. Instead of calling that fear because you understand the sound as God's anger and believe, like they did a long time ago, that something bad is about to happen. The other thing many of these therapies do is to help you learn techniques to energize or calm your nervous system, which helps put your body in an energy state compatible with the amount of energy you actually need for the moment you're in, instead of having your brain supply you with the wrong amount of energy based on a loop of predictions based on past experience that doesn't serve you in the current moment. So I guess what I'm saying is, don't be fooled by the marketing of therapies based on science. And know that therapy doesn't have to be overcomplicated and convoluted. You don't have to believe in and learn about the parts inside of you. You don't need to know about your default mode network or dopamine hits and serotonin. You don't need to know about system 1 and system 2 or your primitive brain versus your logical brain. I mean, you can learn about these things if you really want to, but there's nothing fundamentally true about them that is helping you improve your mental health. If you find that they help you effectively mitigate your symptoms and keep them at bay long term, go for it. Learn those concepts. Otherwise, learning them is a waste of energy. What is real is that all you really need to do to start getting a hold of and altering the status of your mental health is to ask yourself the following. Is the energy level I'm experiencing most of the time in alignment with the amount of energy I need for the moments I'm in? If not, start by taking a look at the pillars of food, sleep, movement, and your community to see if adjusting the lever at one of those will solve your problems. If those efforts fail, then you might want to search for some therapy concepts to help you. For instance, let's say the problems you want to solve include wanting to stop hitting the snooze button for hours every morning, literally like a couple hours or something, and to stop using nicotine and cannabis. You absolutely do not need therapy to start that process. You simply need to start by getting more sleep. That's because the desire for the stimulation of nicotine and the sedative effects of cannabis will naturally fade once you begin to get enough sleep. So in a case like this, the only reason you might need to end up in therapy and dig into the conceptual side of things is that you find that you aren't adjusting your sleep habits. Because at that point, it would benefit you to uncover and understand what beliefs, concepts, ideas are driving the behaviors you are doing instead of changing your sleep habits. And you can bet that 100% of the time, those beliefs are going to circle back around to simple energy function when you dig down to the core. So, if you want to avoid overcomplicated therapy based on outdated science, look for therapists whose practices are built on a foundation of the theory of constructed emotion or a metabolic perspective of mental health. Those therapists are going to drive relentlessly into whether the choices you make, the actions you take, and the concepts and ideas that you use to navigate your life are serving your body's energy budget, and therefore your mental health, or not. And they'll also help you determine if you are under the spell of any erroneous concepts, ideas, making you believe that what you're doing and thinking today are going to serve your body's energy budget in the future, when in fact they won't. And as a result are causing you mental anguish in the meantime, which is a very common problem. And with this understanding of mental health, one based on actual brain function rather than a fairy tale about how the brain works, you'll never end up in a pretzel of conflicting concepts, and you will always have the power to immediately make changes that you want to make, because it will be obvious to you which choices serve the function of your energy budget, and therefore your mental health, and which ones don't. Simple energy function and no judgment. Now, I'm not going to lie. Therapists who work from this perspective are few and far between right now, because the old guard has been marketing their emotional, rational, reactive brain therapies for a lot longer. In fact, I only extracted myself from that nonsense in 2020. But we're out there. You just have to look. And if you don't want to look for somebody else, contact me at leahbensontherapy.com. We'll cut through the noise and get you on the right track pronto. See you later.